So, good morning, everyone. Apologies for the slight delay. We are having a Greek time. Welcome to this fifth Metahuman Futures Forum. It's wonderful to be here yet again in Lesbos and to be accompanied here by the other two project co-organizers. This is the last event of the BodyNet Horos project, which is ending in a few days, 31st of May, and also two of the co-organizers of the forum, Evi Sampanikou, Alexandra Lukaczewicz, and Jean-Marc also as co-organizer, Jean-Marc Matos as co-organizer of BodyNet Horos project. So just a few introductory words before we give the words to Alexandra. Well, as I said, this is the final activity of this 3-year-long project. This is the fourth Metahuman Futures Forum we do here in Lesbos, although it's the fifth of the series because in between we had an online one with Ibero-America. Well, we wanted to also introduce briefly the way in which three of us came, because Evie is from the island, so the other co-organizers were coming this time here doing an experiment in more ecological ways of traveling and staying in the island by a sailboat from Athens, not all the way from our countries, but at least it's the first step from Athens to here. This was Jean-Marc, Alexandra, and me, thanks to Alexandra's generous offer. Should I say anything about the captain? Well, you can say.
There will soon be an online video.
Sorry?
There will soon be.
Yeah, so we will do a video documentary about this. It was a very interesting experience, and we will keep being on the boat for the whole week and the whole stay. I hope that the microphone is sounding. Okay, I mean, for those of you onliners who might see this video until YouTube collapses in a couple of decades along with civilization, the Metahuman Futures Forum was initiated along with the BodyNet Horos EU project, of which the activity is also part, although it will continue now after the activity with also the new project we hope to do beyond this one. So it's a platform that was created with this project. It will keep having its own life. And for those of you unaware of it, so metahumanism was launched in Lesbos as a movement in 2010, so 15 years ago. And it kept evolving. And since 2022, where we did a new manifesto with the first forum here, it kept with a new kind of twist and evolution going. And so this particular proposal of why having a Metahuman Futures Forum, what does it mean versus other kinds of platforms that exist, say post-humanistic or beyond humanism or transhumanistic? Well, this platform, as one can see if you search information on metahuman studies, as here proposed, is on the one hand to radicalize certain aspects of the critique that one finds already in critical posthumanism, but which I personally think still often remains slightly too humanistic in terms of not challenging certain fundamental problems. And at the same time to be in some ways more visionary in terms of the alternatives and how one can move beyond the problem that we see with the whole set of entangled crises that we have today. And then it's a platform that has stated itself right from the beginning as quite opposing transhumanism. Although in this particular conference, we will have, for example, we are open here. We don't reject. So we will have someone who is, I think, bringing together some issues in relation to transhumanism with other currents as well. So, but in principle, it's taking real clear distance from the transhumanistic side, and it's taking further, or so we claim, critical and alternative proposals beyond critical posthumanism. So this is the sense. It was also proposed right from the beginning as a clear stance against what I've been seeing as denialism going on in critical intellectual environments, in the academy, also even in activism in many ways in the global north. versus an acknowledgement of the radicality of the crisis we have on us, mainly because of the ecological crisis, but entangled with everything else. So acknowledging the radicality of that is one purpose of this forum. And then, well, assuming the consequences this has for a radical challenge to human supremacism, as we have been calling it throughout these years, with always trying to find new topics for the main theme of the conference this year. It's entitled Decelerating Extinction Towards Flourishing Pathways Towards Metahuman Futures. So assuming that we have an extinction crisis going on and questioning ourselves whether it is at all possible at this stage to decelerate it, or whether we just have to exchange and share knowledges for mutating along with the extinction. This is one of the aspects this year. So before we move on to Alexandra's talk, maybe my colleagues want to say some words. So Evie is hosting.
Yes, just very few words. For once more, I welcome Jaime and Alexandra and Jean-Marc to this university and this department. As you know from previous years, this is a university that would probably be the most suitable for welcoming a Metahuman Futures Forum in terms of research on sustainability, in terms of ecology, and in terms of possible new solutions for a real post-human and meta-human future. I want to thank all of you for being here, and I do think we can go on with this collaboration for the next years also. Okay.
And not to forget the many dogs and cats around the university that make us a unique environment.
Well, this is always an issue because in difficult times, natural life is always persecuted. So, yes, I have to underline this also. And thank you for everything, all these years.
So, anything you would like to add, Alexandra, Jean-Marc?
Happy to be here again for the third year. And looking forward, listening, hearing, meeting, and dancing with everybody around.
Next time for sure.
I maybe just would like to add one word. I'm happy that we can be again combining theory and practice, like with coming with both, like making theory active, not just talking about nomadic life, but trying to practice it. Not just so like this way of combining theory and practice is very important for me, and I think that it is crucial for the sustainable development, however it sounds. But to make the change, it is not enough to talk. It is not enough to do. It has to be informed doing. Yes, and I'm very happy that we can practice it together. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been a major point always in the forum. So we always have had workshops as well and other activities. Actually, after this, we also again have a small lab at the Queer Festival in Scala Eressos on the 28th, and some projections at the opening of the festival on the 27th. And we will keep also doing experiments, the three of us here, going by boat or other means to that part of the island. And we are already preparing methodologies for the future outdoors labs we want to do in the next stages of projects related to things we have already been developing in this project about creating herbariums for the knowledge of the eatable and medicinal plants, which we are now taking even further in terms of understanding the ecosystem, how it works, how we can try to relearn a non-disruptive co-evolution with specific ecosystems and so forth. So just to say a few words of other activities that we will have, some of them more official, some of them in the background. We keep the work running amongst the the partners and the future partners, because in the future project, so Alexander will also be main partner with Poland in the project, hopefully. And so yeah, that's a core issue in metahumanism always, that thinking cannot just be thought ideological, but it's embodied. It has to be transformed by moving and perceiving differently. That's a key thing. Okay, wonderful. So we can now move on to Alexandra's presentation. We can first put the slides visible, and then I will leave the ground for you. So now I will put this full screen so that we see it online in full mode.
It's not full mode? No, it's full mode. Yes, it's okay. Thank you. Welcome. It is my pleasure again to be here and share with you some of my reflections on the importance of indigenous knowledge in times of climate crisis that we are experiencing, that unfortunately we might foresee that will be turning worse. So it is important how there are different ways of approaching things. One is more kind of ontological, understanding how the things are going, moving and transforming. But my approach since many years is more epistemological, and I'm thinking about knowledge systems and their adaptability, their possibility of transformation, and yes, how we can, construct better, more sustainable systems of beliefs, or how we can maybe also recognize different systems of beliefs that we can call also epistemic systems. But let's go slowly. So generally, I would like to show one interesting situation, one interesting paradox that can be noticed. That is, unfortunately, its results are catastrophic. But we as human species, we always try to make the life easier. We always, for ourselves and generally, like to rule the chaotic nature. But this effort to make the human life easier in the long run, not in the short run, but in the long run, is giving the opposite result. So, when we want to make our life easier, in the long term, we can say that we are arriving at the situation that is life-threatening for ourselves, but also for the earth as such. But for example, we would like, to rest more. Then we are thinking how to move less, how to use more technological means, how to make our life easier. And at the end of the day, our bodies become more weak and we are more tired. Like when we are thinking to spend less time on finding food and cooking, yes, in the long run, with the development of civilization and technological inventions, we are getting ready and processed food, which has got much less nutrition. When we are thinking of being together, yes, because this is kind of important social factor of our species, then we are construing mass buildings, then we are construing megapolis and so forth, in which each and every person is much more separated from the others than before, being in much smaller groups out there in the environment. So in place of being together, although being together, we are so separated that we are becoming more lonely. The same it is with healing. In order to not to feel pain, not to suffer that much, throughout the history, we started to invent, to abstract chemical substances and to produce pharmaceutic
Sorry, I think it's not working, the slide change when it's in full screen. We need to leave it like this. Now it's working. If we put it in full screen here, we don't see it full screen on StreamYard, and it doesn't change slides. So we need to, unfortunately.
Okay, but we can be in this way, yes? Yeah. So then in order, yes, we don't want to suffer. So, and we want like to feel the effect of healing quickly in terms of, long-term processes. So then we invent chemical substances, minimalizing suffering. And at the end of the day, we are getting more ill thanks to them and creating new diseases. So it is kind of paradoxical, yes, that trying to make the life easier, we are making it more difficult, and it is really threatening ourselves on different levels. It seems as though as human animals, we require some effort in order to grow, to flourish. And if we take away this effort, the process of entropy of our species begins. Also, similar situation as I presented now in relation to us as individuals of human species, we can also observe in relation to the Earth, that we really being afraid a bit of the flows of nature, of its sometimes powerful and chaotic strength. We wanted to put order in this house. But this effort of putting order in the chaos, at the end of the day, again in the long term, is bringing or can bring much bigger chaos and great crisis too. So like trying to order things, at the end of the day, we can have greater chaos that at the beginning, this flow, transformative flow that we feared. And again, we can see it that trying to manage. Trying to manage this with its natural or organic, based on flow from the point of view of rational mind, searching for external remedies, yes, external to nature that we perceive as threatening, we are bringing more problems. Yes, trying to manage the water, then we are guiding rivers. At the end of the day, we are taking them very often from their right places, bringing as the result the scarcity of water. Wanting to manage the land for our living, yes. So then we were cutting forests, drying lands for construction, killing animals, and that were fighting for the same niche for survival, and delivering materials for growing cities and civilization. This also, yes, is contributing highly to this climate change, causing depletion of natural resources, which is bringing us on the verge of global climatic chaos. So then, generally, contemporary life, as we know, particularly in developed countries, is heavily dependent on energy supplies, ready-to-consume food, medicines, and manufactured goods. What really is aligned with the proceeding erosion of survival skills that sustained us for millennia. So most of the people now don't know how to grow their own food, nor identify edible resources in nature and process them into nutritious meals. The people don't know how to self-heal, how to search for plants and minerals that have got healing properties, and don't know how to build shelters or make garments. No, all these skills we have kind of outsourced to technological machines. And if the collapse happens, we are completely powerless. We don't know how to survive.
So these skills had not just evolved through the cultural development, but were outsourced to technologies, to specialists, to machines powered by electricity. So this kind of utopia of human comfort drives Earth to overexploitation. Yes, so this really in this catastrophic scenario that we must seriously consider as at least possible, only those who can adapt to new environmental conditions that will be emerging will survive. And this adaptation may take two forms. And on the one hand, it is not both I judge the same positively, but we shall recognize them at least. And it always happened throughout the history of our species also that if there is scarcity of the resources, the response can be appropriation of others' resources. And this conflict is accompanying very often or usually a human crisis or different also environmental crises. But from the other side, it is important, and on this I want to focus, the cultivation of ecological and environmental skills as the skills essential for survival. So even if the future proves challenging, survival will require the creation of a new, albeit temporary ecological balances. So it is not only like to going back to the past. We have to learn from the past, but we will have to adapt to the new situations that were not there before. So this is the reason that I want to stress that we should think about the indigenous knowledges and skills from the perspective of their content and structure. Yeah, so this what they were focusing on, what they knew about the plants, about nature, about finding shelters, how to do things, but also about the structure that is not just a focus on objective knowledge that can be thought as manipulative and having some trying to achieve some universal value, but also very strongly entangled with the environment that is responsive in different manners. So it is not that the knowledge should be kind of representational of the world, but should be more kind of practical. And so this is kind of blurring the difference between this what is skill and this what is knowledge or practical knowledge. But this can be, of course, approached from many different ways, and it is done already since decades. For me, it is one of the first, Charles Sanders Peirce, with his pragmatist maxim, saying that the meaning of the belief is the customary action or behavior that was pointing at this kind of practical side of the knowledge that is not just representational kind of knowledge, but knowledge is the belief that is expressed in customary actions. But it can be also referred to many different current recognitions of the situated, contextualized, embodied forms of knowledge or knowledges. Yes, so for this reason, there are also this concepts appearing nowadays of embodied, embedded, enacted, and extended knowledges. And this extended, I want to stress here, not in transhumanist way, because it does not have to be extended with technological means, but it can be extended environmentally. It can be, this knowledge can be just embedded and extended within the environment that does not need to be definitely technological. Technological environment has got its affordances, like kind of more natural kind of environment has got its affordances, and they are kind of absorbed into the bodies, making the broader combinations. Now I would like to also to point at one important thing, that we tend to think that there is one knowledge, but we might also consider that there are knowledges. And you make a test now. I don't know how it will be in a few decades when the YouTube will be still running, but before the collapse. But anyway, now, if you put in internet knowledges, it will often show you that it is a mistake. If you put in your Word document, it will show you that it is a mistake. But you can also find that it is not necessarily a mistake. There are perspectives that are stressing this, that there are different ways of knowing. Yes, that we don't have to think that there is just one knowledge, the only one right knowledge, having objective truth about the world that we are building in the process, and all other systems of beliefs, yes, kind of diverted. They are just more kind of practical things, but it is not real knowledge. So really, we should rather think about existence of different situated and contextualized knowledges. Yes, it is the situation similar like with the concept of culture. Still in 19th century, we tended to think that there is one culture that develops through the history and can be on the lower or higher level of development. And later we noticed that really we can think about different cultures, yes? So like going from this early form of evolutionary approach in cultural studies to relativist approach in cultural studies, noticing that there are different cultures, not that there is just one culture. So here we can also think about rather different knowledges, different systems of beliefs, different epistemic systems that are referring, and dealing with the world outside, with the environment, rather than with just one knowledge. So, and this is the topic that is now taken up by different researchers, and how to agree there's two different ways of approaching knowledge. From one side, we have got indigenous knowledge or knowledges different from different cultures, and from the other, we have got scientific knowledge. Yes, is it? We tended before recognition of indigenous knowledges as valid enough to be considered knowledges and not just beliefs, was considered as a higher version of the knowledge, as the one that is really having universal standards and is trying to represent objectively the world, while others are just kind of better or worse attitudes to the world. So from one side, we have got like ethno-epistemology, we may say, that is focusing on indigenous knowledges. And from the other side, we have got epistemology focused on scientific and objective knowledge. So, and they have got different kind of epistemic standards. In order to agree them both, yes, in one plane to understand their places, we can approach it from meta-epistemological level. If we don't do it, yes, we might be relegating this indigenous knowledge to the realm of beliefs, yes, and but if we recognize that this is one knowledge, this is the other knowledge, there are different kind of knowledges, we have to take this meta-epistemological point of view. And then we can recognize that there are different epistemic standards, that is different conditions under which particular propositional attitudes are qualified as knowledge of a certain kind. So here we can of course develop it deeply, but generally scientific knowledge was always focused on universality and objectivity. while this kind of indigenous knowledges are more situated, yes, that are more situated, contextual, and usually they are focused on rather immediate efficiency and also the coherency with other beliefs in the holistic worldview that one or the other culture has. So we can recognize that there can be different or various epistemic standards in different kind of epistemic systems. Yes, it is not necessary to assume that there is just one epistemic standards, but there might be different. Yes, reliability, indefeasibility. Yes, this is, for example, very nicely developed by Claude Gélinas and Yves Bouchard in relation to northern Algonquian, yes, in Canada, in eastern Canada and United States, where they are looking more into the kind of epistemic standards that this community have for their ways of knowing. And generally there is this context, this is a kind of case study. They are noticing first this contextual and immediate efficiency of the propositional belief and the coherence and profitability of such propositional beliefs, because they have to be profitable into the holistic worldview that the community have. Indigenous knowledges are also recognized as a part of intangible heritage that is requiring protection. And this is recognized already by UNESCO. And here I would like to just address shortly the way of transformation of the concept of heritage since at least 50s of 20th century until nowadays. Because the concept of the heritage is not immobile, but it is transforming. For example, first it was focused on material cultural heritage without speaking it up. It was just heritage, but the heritage that was addressed was material, cultural, having artistic value, as it was addressed by the recommendations of New Delhi in 1956. Later, also the natural heritage was recognized, and the dates here are 1962, 1972. Then also this intangible cultural heritage in 2003 was recognized by the General Convention of UNESCO. There are also other kinds of heritage like digital cultural heritage with the recommendations of its protection in 2009. But focusing on this intangible cultural heritage, as UNESCO is putting it out, is encompassing, among others, knowledge systems, arts and crafts, rituals and social practices, together with tangible items like instruments, objects, and living spaces, which are linked to their accomplishment. So, intangible heritage is encompassing knowledge systems. Knowledge systems are part of intangible heritage that requires protection, but it does not require protection as a kind of fossil in the museum, but is also recognized by UNESCO that this heritage is embodied in the people, and its creation and maintenance depends on the social structure, so that it is important to include local, that is indigenous communities, in the process of safeguarding of the indigenous cultural heritage. Yes. And generally, it is also important to notice that these indigenous knowledges very often have got this kind of strong ecological significance. And I would like here to read one quote from very interesting author, Fulvio Mazzocchi, that is also arguing for recognizing indigenous knowledges as epistemic systems. This is the term that he uses. Western sciences seeks an understanding of physical reality in the way that mainly enables manipulative and predictive power. This has given us an unprecedented ability to transform nature by technological means, which has yet also resulted in perilous exploitation beyond control. In indigenous environments, the priority is instead knowing how to behave in line with their perspective of unity and relationality. All elements of the universe are interlinked, interdependent, and immersed in relation of reciprocity, living in balance with natural and social surroundings. Indigenous expertise is indeed a genuine and cultural expertise of long-term sustainability. So then also Fulvio Mazzocchi in this paper diving deeper in the concept of cultural heritage and its relationship with epistemic diversity is bringing up very interesting concept of epistemic diversity that is a part of cultural diversity. Yes, so this cultural diversity is encompassing situated and contextualized knowledges, that is different epistemic systems. So we can talk about this epistemic diversity that is also guiding us towards pluralism of knowledges, or knowledge pluralism. And this epistemic diversity can be viewed as a characteristic assuring cognitive resilience of our species, that is an overall kind of emergent feature, just like bioecological diversity that ensures a greater adaptive ability to entire species of us. So to entire humankind, as Fulvio Mazzocchi says. So this means that if we have got different epistemic systems that we can use as a kind of tools, that is not just objective knowledge of a representational kind, we can deal better with the environment. And this knowledge pluralism, of course, claims that there are different valid standards for reliability, so there are different ways of being epistemologically successful. Yes. So just to finish, because the time is running and it's already 11, I would like to stress this importance again of content and structure of indigenous knowledges. Yes, the indigenous cultures that are deeply intertwined with nature possess the critical skills that are necessary to deal with difficult situations, also the situations of crisis. They are not perceiving themselves, and we also should not perceive ourselves as separate from the environment. Either this is technological environment, or is it environment in the crisis, or is it fully beautiful environment. We are part of the environment, responding to the affordances and absorbing parts of the environment in ourselves and extracting parts of ourselves through the environment in the context exchange. So we should not perceive ourselves like a closed monads moving in the clear space, but as deeply intertwined with the environment. So this is the lesson that we should learn, first of all, from this, from indigenous cultures, and absorb from indigenous knowledges. Engaging ourselves in a reciprocal relationship with the environment intentionally and consciously. So, of course, yes, from one side, I agree that we should follow the United Nations recommendation to preserve the content, yes, of indigenous traditional knowledges, the things how to do, how to find food, how to heal ourselves, what can be used, how can it be used, but we cannot, and this is the second point, just repeat or merely replicate the indigenous traditional lifestyles, because the conditions are different, the conditions are still changing, and they will be different anyway. We just should, so then this is this idea of focusing on rather of structure of the knowledge, not only on the content, although content can be supportive also for us in the times of ecological crisis, but the structure too. And we should adopt this relational approach to the environment, recognizing our interdependence with nature. then even if the future proves challenging, we can respond to it because and survive, creating new temporary ecological balances. And this is something that I would like to call for and discuss with you. Thank you for your attention, and I invite you for the discussion.
Thank you so much. Let's take a few minutes for discussion. David and Sophie are waiting in the background. Please wait with us a few minutes more. We started with a bit of delay, but we will soon be with you. So let's take some minutes if we have some question or comment from the local audience or even the remote one.
Yes, please.
This is a very...
Try to put on your microphone so that we have everything.
Yes, this is a crucial discussion, actually. I mean, there are a lot of opinions from not only transhumanists, but from the public in general that...
Click again on the...
Oh, no. Yes, I'm here. Oh, sorry, I have to... There are a lot of opinions from the public, mainly, from non-specialists, I mean, but supported by transhumanists and others for the body that needs to be an augmented body to face future conditions, to come into, a deal to survive with future solutions. And it's always an issue. How are the indigenous knowledge adapt to different conditions? What do you think? Because you're discussing with indigenous people, and are they? Do you think they're ready to adapt to an extinction period worse than this one?
I'm not really sure if I get all the ideas straight, but yes, I don't know many indigenous communities. I know best some of them in East Africa, the best Mijikenda, 9 tribes on the coast, together with elders and so forth. And they are very much engaged in the process of preservation of their culture, and they are adapted to the situation that there is now. Also, with the lack of resources, with lack of water, with the very scarce rainy seasons. Generally, Mijikenda people were gather hunters that later settled and started fishing and having some agriculture. But first of all, they are collecting things in their environment, so they are not that much based on the plantations that are not even belonging to them, mostly to some other people from the upcountry, or Swahili people, or white expats. So generally, I think that they are kind of ready for to survive the difficult times. They are also not rejecting technology, although because it is not like this that in order to preserve the culture, they have to reject technology. If they want to preserve their culture, they have to be focusing on certain approaches, attitudes, values, forms of doing things, but it does not mean that they cannot go on TikTok. It does not mean that they cannot record something 360 for whatever purposes. Does not mean that they cannot use
AI to make some videos on the basis of their knowledge to propagate some information between the youth. They can absorb, they are absorbing it as I see it. Of course, there's always this, but they are still very resistant to the kind of this extractivism. They're not working too much. They are not collecting too much. But in order to even to protect and disseminate their forms of knowledges, they can find some consensus with technology, although it is not necessary, like for their own self-standing. But in terms of crisis, yes, of course, that much better than people based on agriculture. They are just they came like their prehistory is that they are coming from bush people from South Africa. Later came to the center, moved to the east coast around Somalia, and then descended perhaps around 16th century along the Kenyan coast. So they are just like bush people, gather hunters already now in different conditions.
I mean, this is one of the major topics of debate that we were proposing for this forum, actually for this afternoon, the final big discussion, but it's good to get it started already. That, that may be, in fact, the only people who may be kind of equipped, somehow equipped for adapting to the upcoming situations, maybe some of the existing indigenous people, and the more they rely, the less that they rely on sedentary modes of living that are highly improbable to be possible in the upcoming situations, and which have also been foundational to the current crisis. So both things going together. The less one relies on that, the better, which means for sure, in my opinion, the ones that will not make it through, hopefully also, is transhumanistic approaches to relying on highly, radically unsustainable technological extensions, which are precisely the ones that have caused the crisis, and which are precisely the ones that are very unlikely to be existing during the upcoming period. So both things going together, right? So the debate for this afternoon, but which we can get started, is has any of this, which we assume of sedentary civilization, not just AI, but industrial environments and even agriculture, have any future if we look at it realistically, not just based on opinions and beliefs, but really understanding on a research-based situation, if we understand the crisis and so forth. Can this have any future? This is, let's wait for, okay. But I was kind of making visual contact with Evie, so let's wait for her.
But maybe I will add, there are different ways of merging things. For example, I like elders walking with their and charging their telephones with their solar panel on their head. Yes, so they walk through a bush with their solar panel that is charging their telephone that they have in their back, and and then you can. So this is also the ways that you can adapt and use technologies for the benefit. The problem becomes also like then when like in Spain, you have got all these fields of solar panels that are not even feeding with energy supplies the villages or towns nearby, but are outsourced by the companies. Yes.
Yeah. So going back to the problem is when you scale things up, and when you try to think even how that might look. I mean, when there are no longer even smartphones anymore existing because the microchip industry is no longer possible within 3 decades from now, maybe, if we are realistic, if we are not utopian or dystopian.
Well, this is what I'm trying to criticize. I mean, there's this transhumanistic attitude that we're going to be, augmented for a future that will be in worse climate conditions. I believe it cannot happen. The only way to do it is vice versa, to go back to being evolved into more natural circumstances and into a more natural adaptation process. That was a comment about.
Yeah.
In my opinion, if I may add something here shortly, is this that I think that we are like on the crossing, on bifurcation of evolution, and we might choose because there might some people might want to mutate together with technology and go somewhere else and become some other being. Some will prefer to stay and mutate according to their transforming environment. So I think that there are like, it does not mean that we'll be the same kind of beings, but I think that there is a kind of fundamental choice which way we think that is better in some way from some point of standards that we agree upon.
Yeah. So we will soon move on to Sophie, but yeah.
I was thinking about the presentation, and you said something about learning the epistemological front of indigenous, the framework basically of the indigenous knowledge. And this made me think about, okay, most of them actually support themselves through mythologies. And right now, most of the world is connected to a religion, an anthropocentric religion. So maybe on a practical front, if we kind of meaningfully adapt an institutional pedagogy about going on the East front, because in the East we can see philosophies and religions which are more connected with the world, Buddhism, Confucianism. So maybe it's the first step towards connecting with nature and learning about respecting different ontologies.
But how I disagree that they are anthropocentric. I mean, the mythologies. Most of
traditional African religions, they have got the concept of God, but this God is not active at all. It is just like a sun, something created. But generally, the world is full of different kinds of agents, and it is completely natural to think about non-human agents. And generally, the air is full of different kind of agents, spirits, and so forth. And it is not like animalism. No, it is rather, thinking about the world that is dense in different kind of living entities and energies that are interacting. And being aware of this allows to move a bit, kind of better, not just to go in front and impose your things, searching for conflict, but rather, like aligning with the with nature, with animals, with the ancestors, with the earth from which we are coming from, and where you are going back directly. Yeah, so it is very also this kind of like that the houses in Eastern Africa, home is not a house, it's not a hut, it's a homestead. Yes, where people are living together. And hut you sometimes might hide yourself for some purposes. And also traditionally, family members are buried within the homestead. So later you eat cocoa and banana and these sweets from baobab that are, grown from your ancestors directly. So you see that the cycle is not just kind of abstract or mythological, it is just very kind of substantial thing that
this the circle of life within the earth. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, we will continue the discussion. Let's shortly. No, not now, please. Not now. Let's move on. I mean, if someone wants to go for the coffee, it's fine. Okay, so let's move on now. Just 1 second. To Sophie and David, who are waiting there for a while. Just let me see if I can share something. So I was showing here. Okay, so Sophie and David, I will add you now to stage.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Well, Sophie Gosselin and David G. Bartoli. It's a great honor and pleasure to have you here. Let me just say a few words introducing you for the local and online audience. Sophie is a philosopher, David is a philosopher and a creator of performance rituals, if I am correct. People can read on that. They have these two wonderful books that I am showing now in the shared screen. The first that came out was Le toucher du monde, technique du naturé. So the touch of the world, techniques of naturing, one could say, right? And, La condition terrestre, the terrestrial condition, which is a later book. And I think have wonderful worlds of ideas that are connecting in deep forms with some of the things we've been discussing these years at the Metahuman Futures Forum. So the idea this time was to have an open dialogue between me and them, and then of course with the audience and other people. And we had thought of maybe loosely structuring a debate around three major points. First one on their meta-ontological worldview, like how they are proposing a complex mesh of ideas for overcoming ontology, actually, in the world of fixed entities, and how to produce different meta-ontological, what they call pathic rather than ontic approach to the world. We can come back to that in a minute. The second might be also this point we have much in common with this forum, and which is the idea that one can never stay on purely ideological planes, but we need to and how we perceive, move, relate in the world, embodied. So we can exchange that also, and then finally focusing more on the politics, maybe also on what you, David and Sophie, are focusing more in the second book, on more concrete examples of how some of these meta-ontologies are happening in other existing knowledges, indigenous knowledges, or other experiments going on in the world, like when one acknowledges the personhood of an ecosystem, for example, things like that. And also really like more pragmatic things, what does all of this provide for challenging the elephant in the room, which is much of the dominant ways of living that are actually creating the major threats for livable futures in many rejects. So if we go to this first point, like if you allow me to just introduce some of the very compelling things I have found in your complex field, especially in Le Toucher du Monde. So one of a very compelling center point of this field, which I find is your conception of naturing, naturer, correct me later, but it's a process of meshing, right? Which is linked to this concept from the lignée of the arachnéen, right? So this meshing, this process of meshing is the process of naturing. That is also the process grounded on the écart, the variations of the bodies and the variations of the events in nature itself, this differential process. Where also you have the pathic rather than ontic nature, so this meshing made of multiple affections. And then interesting is also how you connect this to modes of knowing, like a co-naissance rather than connaissance. So knowledge is being emergent in those meshes, to a co-sensing and a co-motion, which for me are crucial. I mean, they resonate immensely with my own kind of approaches to movement philosophy. So co-sensing and co-moving also I theorize in my own ways. And then also how you bring in there touch as something that displaces the ocular-centric paradigm towards this pathic way of understanding naturing as the co-nascent, co-moving, co-sensing. And then even very importantly, how you rethink techniques as part of that. So techniques as being the articulation of the modes coming up in those fields, right? Across then sales, the thresholds of consistency. So I find, just to choose some of your wonderful concepts, I think this already brings in a very rich kind of resonance field of possibilities for rethinking the world and ourselves beyond the tragic ontological metaphysics of splitting the world into categories for the sake of domination. So welcome. And whatever you want to elaborate on this first issue, I leave the ground to you. I will now take off these slides with the two books so that we can see you better.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation and as well for the summary.
Because the volume here is a bit low. Does anyone here know how we can put up the volume in the room? Sorry, just 1 second. Maybe here here it's okay. Let's try now.
Yes, can you hear me better?
Now it's better, yeah.
Okay.
Later, by the way, I will be translating also with David, so we can do French translation. Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, also for the great summary you just did of our book, which is not easy, and you understood very well what we try to bring forward. So maybe I can first make a first answer by making a link with what was said before, which was very interesting, because the issues that were just approached before in the panel before in the discussion were exactly a bit the starting point of the book Le Toucher du Monde, because we come from, and particularly me, from a background which we were very involved into art, technological art, and at a certain point we had a critical analysis of our own practice and the use we could develop of technology, and also of the impact of technology. I mean, when I say technology, I mean digital technology mainly, but also in general industrial technology, the impact on the ways of inhabiting the world, of inhabiting our body, and the model of knowledge which underlies it. So it was a bit all this that we were wanted to question. It's the system of domination that we saw at stake in this kind of technology. We mainly the kind of genealogy to the model of knowledge that emerged at the Renaissance, which a lot of other thinkers have done. But what we were seeing with the digital technology was a new step forward in the way in the implementation of this model of knowledge, which, as you said, is based mainly on the rupture between the spirit and the body, and everything's focused on how the spirit can categorize the world from a point of view which is completely abstract, and that always how can I say delegitimates other forms of knowledge, and mainly knowledge that are linked to the experience and to the experience of the sensitivity and of the body and the way it is related to other bodies. So the difficult issue we had to approach is how to develop a critique of technology, which is not only a critique, which is not only saying again, like most of the thinkers we read, saying, denouncing how technology was destroying the world, how industry was destroying the world, but how can we rethink other ways of thinking technique, because we didn't want to be to on the other side go on the idea that we have to renounce to all form of techniques, and that we have to go back to a kind of pure nature, essential nature. And we thought we are fighting the two perspectives, radical constructivism, technological constructivism, and at the other side, the kind of more essential naturalism. So we were trying to find a way between the two. And this is why we mainly said, well, we basically the two, one main, how can we say, reversal that we tried to do was to say, creating a rupture with the anthropocentric perspective on technique, approach of technique, saying that there's not only, technique is not only a system of means by which human has a mastery on nature, but each form of being, each way of becoming in the world, as a body, a form of life, is already a form of technique. Technique is a way of creating a world, a space, and of articulating space and time. And that is something we really experience as artists as well, is the fact that when we use some technique, if we use analogical technique, if we use digital technology, the space and time that we create through this technology is not the same. And that was a kind of sensitive experience, that technology is not only a mean, but is really a way of creating, of opening a space and time, and a way of being with the others. So it was that we experienced, and we saw that all the forms of beings, animals, plants, also had techniques, I mean, ways of creating a space and time to cohabit with other forms of beings. So this was the first idea, to have a more kind of ecocentric perspective of the question of technique, and also displacing the technique in the relation to the body, and not only as a mean of the spirit to act on reality which would be outside. So that was the first thing. And the other thing was then to see that if technique is opening in space and time, specific, and a way of co-inhabiting with others, then there are multiple forms of techniques. And some forms of techniques are dominating structurally because they impose one space and time to all the others. So one way of cohabiting. And that's what we saw in industry, in technology, industrial technology, and in digital technology, is that it imposes a universal time. And so it goes against the idea of plurality of forms of making worlds and of inhabiting the world. So this, and that's what brought us also, and in relation to that, there was the idea of criticizing the model of knowledge, which is, as you said, it the ontic model of knowledge, which mainly defines what exists. And we said pathic model of knowledge, kind of pathic knowledge, meaning pathic, we come back to the Greek tipaskes that gave them, well, you know better than me, but what we read about it is that the Greek version in antique, what we read about is that tipaskes is not only suffering, because often pathos is translated as suffering something. We are passive. It's passive, conceived as passiveness. And what we found in the lectures we had is that tipaskes was an active formulation. It was, what do we cross? What transformation are we living? Are we experiencing? And that we found was very interesting. So the idea of pathic is not only the idea of being passive, but is that the sensitivity is what allows us to have an experience of transformation. So it's the possibility of having a knowledge of the transition of the events, of the metamorphosis. How can we? What does it mean to have knowledge taking into account the events, taking account singularity, taking account metamorphosis? This is very difficult because our model of knowledge is based on the idea that we have to identify repetitions of the same. That is the scientific model of knowledge. We have to do experiences to identify what is the same, what repeats, to bring out laws of nature. So what does it mean is that all our model of knowledge is based on the fact of putting aside singularity. Everything that is singular, everything that is like an event, is a transition, can't be understood in this model of knowledge. So the idea was to reverse and think, so what does it mean to have a knowledge of what is experienced in a process of movement, in a metamorphosis? Well, this knowledge is embedded in the experience itself. But it's not fusion. And that was all the idea of the écart, what we call écart, kind of separation, is that how do you create a separation in this process of transformation? So I don't know if maybe we can more discuss it a bit in the questions.
Alors, Jaime, tu peux un petit peu peut-être traduire? Je vais peut-être revenir sur notre rencontre avec Sophie en 2005 et sur la rencontre que tu viens d'avoir avec ton chien.
C'est pas mon chien, c'est le chien. C'est une université, je dois le dire pour que vous le sachiez, unique au monde, que je sache, parce qu'elle est pleine de chiens et de chats qui habitent ici et qu'on prend soin de eux, qui sont partout. Parce que moi, je suis de l'Espagne, donc je viens ici, on collabore beaucoup, mais oui, mais c'est un environnement unique à ce niveau. Donc, on a ici plusieurs, on a 3 chiens ici qui sont de l'université, qui sont très proches à Evie Sampanikou, c'est la chercheuse.
Hello, I didn't say hello.
Evie is the host.
C'est le hôte. We welcome you. Thank you very much for your participation here.
Yes, so...
Et on vit... Pardon, elle veut peut-être poser une question.
You were about to say something.
Et non, on a été en Grèce là en avril et on s'est rendu compte qu'effectivement l'esprit de la Grèce, il me semble que dans la plupart des lieux, c'est les chats. Et j'ai été surpris de voir effectivement autant de chats errants, soignés, accueillis dans les temples sacrés ou dans les temples profanes. C'était très agréable de voir ces chats. Et ça me fait penser donc, on vient nous avec 2 traditions, avec Sophie, de Derrida, l'hospitalité, la déconstruction, et l'animal donc que je suis. Et de l'autre côté, Guattari, avec les 3 écologies. Et dans les 2 cas, notre rapport effectivement à la pensée et au savoir a changé, puisque Derrida, avec la déconstruction, essaie de mettre en crise l'assignation ontique ou de l'identique de l'être, Et Guattari va essayer de prendre en charge ce qui ne dépend pas de l'intention humaine, puisqu'il travaillait dans une clinique psychiatrique avec des gens qui souffraient de schizophrénie ou d'autres, et donc où la socialité, les rapports n'étaient pas depuis l'intention, depuis
Conscience.
depuis la conscience ou le cognitivisme, mais depuis l'ensemble des relations. Et c'est à travers l'articulation des deux où l'intention n'est plus maîtresse et où l'assignation n'impose pas un être. Et c'est là où on a essayé de penser justement une relation, une pensée de la relation. Et le pathique, c'est une relation dont on n'est pas indemne. On est sans cesse touché et articulé avec de l'autre qu'humain. Et dans la clinique psychiatrique de la Borde, on se soigne en présence des animaux, des arbres, de la forêt à proximité, des personnes qui traversent le lieu. Et donc, il y a un champ de transfert multiréférentiel et multispécifique. Et c'est là où, quelque part, on n'a plus l'anthropocentrisme, le logocentrisme et l'intentionnalité.
So David was first referring to in this encounter in Greece in 2005 how well the surprise now that there's opportunity here with dogs because they associated more the cats to the Greek environment. They were previously referring also to these Greek concepts that maybe we can go back later in the debate. Tipaskes, maybe the Greek people in the room can help with that. And then explaining that so they are working on the convergence between a Derridian background, working on a deconstruction of ontic concepts from within, and then a Guattarian background, working more from the thinking of people who are already outside that ontic framework. And so it is in the meshing of these two approaches that they came up with some of the issues, like this issue, correct me if I'm, of the ECA, which I would like to go back to, as a mode of separation that is through touch. So it's a separation that is a contact at the same time. And so that's where you go beyond the anthropocentric separation, and you find one which is about this meshing, which is about this co-becoming. And then the touch is, I guess, a central concept for you. Maybe this can be a next question. Like if you want to elaborate on the écart, I would be very interested in how you think this rethinking separation as a contact, which is differential by principle, I guess. And if you want to, did I kind of summarize properly?
Et peut-être pour préciser, c'est justement dans la clinique psychiatrique de la Borde où on est tombé sur les écrits de Fernand Deligny, qui a écrit sur l'arachnéen. Et à partir de l'arachnéen, ça nous a permis de poser la différence entre la technologie de réseau, le web, qui n'est pas l'arachnéen de Deligny. Pourquoi? Parce que Deligny, son réseau n'est pas un réseau d'acteurs conscients, intentionnels. C'est-à-dire que travaillant avec des personnes qui n'ont pas le langage assuré pour se comprendre, le langage va être directement par le corps, comme si c'était des sourciers, comme si le corps devait prendre en charge des énergies, des liens, des relations, non seulement avec la géographie du moment, mais avec des temps profonds. Et le lien qu'on peut avoir avec la géographie du moment et les temps profonds, c'est ce qu'il appelle un chevêtre. On n'est pas un être, on chevêtre deux lignes entre aujourd'hui et des gestes, des lignes anciennes. Et donc, ça fait travailler les temps que ne permet pas le réseau Internet. Le réseau Internet nous oblige à être d'un temps présent, mais qui n'a pas de profondeur. Donc, si on veut chercher l'écologie profonde, c'est aussi chercher les temps profonds qui travaillent sur nous. Et les temps profonds, c'est un arbre de 250 ans, c'est un étang de 1000 ans, c'est une montagne d'1 million d'années, et ça nous travaille, ça travaille nos corps. Et notre savoir, notre connaissance vient de ces corps. C'est ça l'arachnéen. Comment se laisser travailler par des temps qui ne nous appartiennent pas, mais dont le corps appartient aux vivants. Le pathique, c'est aussi ça.
And, maybe I make the link with the question you asked on the écart.
Shall I first translate the last thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah.
So let's see if I can bring the whole thing, probably just part of it. So you were saying that how, if I understood correctly, you were in the clinique of Labar. So there you had the encounter with also, I guess, also with Guattari's work, but with Deligny, from whom you derived this idea, or you took or elaborated in your way the idea of the arachnein as this webbing, in which, but you maybe I will ask you about the precise difference I didn't fully get between Deligny's concept and your concept. I think you said there is a difference, but anyway. So I think the way you take it on is a webbing which is made of lines of time, some of which are deep time, which is merging with our time. We let ourselves be traversed by these older lines of time, which is linked to deep ecology, like say the time of the tree with whom we make ecosystem. And so that this webbing of the world is made of all these different and differing lines of time. As part of this idea of the arachnein as the webbing of naturing and of techniques as well. But I'm not sure if I was summarizing correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. But then I didn't fully understand. So I think you said there was a difference then between your own elaboration of it and Deligny's, right? Okay.
Well, actually, Deligny is more a kind of poetic approach of this. He was more somebody really into action, education, worked with children, with autistic children, and he was trying to invent ways of inhabiting without trying to conform, wait for the autistic children to conform to the model of the logocentric model of behaving. And so he said we have to take in account their way of being and try to cohabit, and that's where he started to draw lines. He drew the lines of how the children and the adults cohabited and crossed the same space, and didn't where did they meet. Actually, he wanted to see where did they meet, so he drew lines on comment on dit calque, on kind of layer different he made a kind of cartography of transparent sheets where he drew lines, and he could see how the lines would cross between the different people. But what was interesting is that in these lines you can also integrate all the other lines of the other beings, the animals, the plants, and so it can potentially, well, that's what we saw. We kind of pushed the more kind of ecocentric perspective in Deligny's approach. We really kind of went to create a kind of really totally ecocentric perspective on Deligny's conception of arachnéen. So that's why so to come back on the idea of écart, I don't know how to translate it in English, because gap is not very...
I had this doubt a lot when reading your book. How would one translate it? I think it's a complex term to translate. Maybe if
because we speak about écart de contact in one kind of word. We make a word, so I don't know.
One term I found that was also just a differential rather than a split, but I don't know if this
works. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's more a differential. Exactly. I mean, maybe differential would be the best word, because it's related also. If you, the word écart it's also trace in the other way. It's the same letters. And actually, what we retake the concept of trace of Derrida, but in this idea of differentiating, process of differentiation, and that's a trace is not print. Print is positive. A trace is a differential, a process of differential. So the idea was we also rethinking the idea of sensitivity. What do we call sensitivity? Going back to Merleau-Ponty, and Merleau-Ponty, the question of the perception of the body when he really abandoned the more kind of phenomenologic traditional perspective of the conscious subject to go on what do we experience when we touch something or when we are touched by something or somebody. And he says, in fact, the paradox is that the condition of being touched, of feeling the touch, of even when we touch ourselves, is that there is a difference between the touched and the touching. And this is the condition of the possibility of feeling. And that's what we found interesting, is that often we, in the metaphysical ontology, traditional Western ontology, sensitivity is systematically pushed in the idea of fusion, of indetermination, of what has no form, what is the contrary of the spirit that distinguishes, that makes, differentiates. And this idea of Merleau-Ponty, that the condition of touching and of being touched, of the possibility of feeling, presupposes the idea that there is inside of the experience of touching a difference. And we said, but that's the starting point. That's where the issue of technique can be approached differently, because what is a technique is a way of giving form to this difference, to what's differentiating itself through the body. So the technique is not outside. It's not something that you put on the body, which would be closed on itself, but the body itself is already always in a process of differentiation with himself. And his technique is how this process of differentiation opens the space and time of cohabitation through different tools, different means, but the means are just kind of residual form, expression of the techniques of naturing that are this process of formation and transformation. So, yeah, well.
Peut-être quelque chose en plus. Si on va sur la deuxième question que tu voulais peut-être aborder, le collapse et la relation, comment traverser cette crise de notre relation au vivant. C'est pour ça que pour nous, deux lignées est important, parce qu'il ne présuppose pas une intention avec le langage pour, comme contrat d'existence avec les êtres, mais justement, quelque chose est en dessous du langage. Et Deligny appelle ça l'arachnéen, et le psychiatre qui était à la Borde, Jean Houry, lui parlait de sous-jacence. Quelque chose est en dessous du sujet de conscience et même en dessous du sujet de l'inconscient. Il y a certains psychotiques qui n'ont même plus, qui paraissent plus ne plus avoir les conditions de l'inconscient. Et on a remarqué ça aussi dans les camps de concentration. Il y avait une telle désaffection que l'inconscient n'avait plus les capacités de se ressourcer avec d'autres que de l'humain, et il y avait un appauvrissement de l'inconscient. Et donc, il voyait qu'il y avait quelque chose qui était en dessous de l'inconscient, c'est la sous-jacence. Et donc là, ce qui nous semble important, c'est que c'est lié à des crises existentielles personnelles, historiques, comme des camps de concentration, et aujourd'hui, climatiques et mondiales, comme les vivants qui tombent, la disparition des vivants autour de nous. Depuis 40 ans que j'ai pêché l'anguille, il y a 70% d'anguilles en moins dans la Loire. Ça se voit, je le vois. Et donc, dans ces moments de collapse, comment traverser ce moment? Ça veut dire qu'effectivement, il nous faut nous repenser, non pas comme être humain, mais comme vivant humain. On se réinscrit dans le mouvement des vivants et on traverse la perte. Si on traverse pas la perte, on va subir le deuil et on va rester coincé dans le deuil et on va soit rester moderne, soit rester humaniste ou soit être en dialectique avec l'humanisme, mais on va pas traverser. Et il nous semble qu'aujourd'hui, la traversée de notre crise, c'est l'horizon d'être terrestre, d'être une personne terrestre, d'assumer d'être vivant, un peu fantomatique, un peu humain, un peu anguille. Et c'est cette personne chimère, un peu hybride, qui nous permet de traverser le collapse de l'être humain, tel que fabriqué par les modernes.
Donc, avant de traduire, si j'ai compris bien, tu veux dire que cette idée de sous-jacence qu'on trouve à des lignes, etc., on doit aussi mettre en pratique notre sous-jacence, notre mode d'être qui sont au-delà d'une conscience humaine pour aussi pouvoir vivre avec d'autres modes de vie. Right?
Exactement, c'est exactement ça.
Oui.
C'est ça.
So, okay, so this was going back a bit to Deligny and the clinic and how in the clinic there were cases that were so deep where one could even find no traces of, say, human consciousness or even unconscious. And so there was the so-called sous-jacence. I don't know how we can translate this, the subjacent. And so now connecting this to the ecological crisis, and I find this really interesting. So how it's about also claiming and activating this subjacent way of being beyond humanistic and human-centric kinds of consciousness that that also need to be activated in order to relearn to co-live and coexist throughout the upcoming crisis with the rest of the living. I guess since much of this rest of the living is also not relying on these human-centric kinds of consciousness. I think this connects a lot to things we have been discussing in the forum, actually, like, and activating, So, thank you. Did I summarize properly, more or less? Well, not correct.
Yeah, but maybe what David wanted to say is that it's our definition of conception of what does it mean to be human that is at stake. Because the idea of human is always it's always been the result of a definition through history, and today what we experience collectively is that the conception of humanity that to which we identified in the modern paradigm is completely falling apart, but it is the possibility of experiencing layers of experience that were negated by this conception of human and that are part of us as living beings. And so the idea of the two books we wrote and the terrestrial perspective that we try to define is how do we reopen ourselves to these experiences and to these layers of experience that were completely crushed by a certain concept of human, and that allow us to relate again to other living beings. So it's searching our non-human part. Is we are also non-human, and we are composed, and because we are also non-human, and is that allow us to relate to the other non-humans. And what we try to search through this issue of sensitivity, of techniques of nurturing, is this non-human part of us which allow us to re-inhabit with the other livings in the world, and also to welcome the different temporalities that involve. So it's as if we are hybrid temporalities in each body we have. We have different temporalities. So it's because we explore these different temporalities in the sensitivity that we can relate also to other temporalities, and like the temporality of the forest, of the mountain, of other species, which are completely different, but this is also part of us. And so that's the idea of what we call in the book La Condition Terrestre, the terrestrial person, is how do we cross this experience where we accept this transformation and the non-human part of us.
So just to say, this is extremely resonant with the kind of metahuman conception we've been debating here. Sorry, David wanted to add something.
Je voulais peut-être justement dire que si effectivement, avec la pensée de Derrida de la construction qui a été repris aux Amériques pour déconstruire le genre, déconstruire notre rapport au corps, une chose que Derrida ne voulait pas, et il l'a annoncé, c'est pour lui, la déconstruction doit toujours être à l'intérieur de son propre schéma civilisationnel et culturel. Il ne voulait pas déconstruire au-delà de l'apport occidental. Donc, dans le toucher du monde, c'est là où on a commencé à prendre aussi des concepts ou des conceptualités hors de l'espace occidental, qu'elles viennent effectivement de la pensée chinoise ou de la pensée d'Amérique du Sud ou du Japon. En tout cas, il nous a semblé qu'il fallait déconstruire aussi la frontière interne à la critique du langage. Et il nous semble que aujourd'hui, ce qui s'est passé en acceptant notre condition terrestre, c'est de passer de l'acte performatif qui suppose le speech act, il suppose quand même la parole, et l'acte. Et aujourd'hui, on est plutôt dans une connaissance transformative où la forme n'est plus liée forcément à un signe positif, à un langage, mais à un corps qui varie. Et la différence des corps fait un nouveau langage, mais qui n'est plus le langage de la performance du contrat parlé. Et c'est pour ça qu'aujourd'hui, tu as invité l'année dernière Emma Biget, mais j'ai aussi fait de la danse contact avec eux ou de l'écosomatique. Et il me semble que dans ces domaines-là, justement, on essaie de trouver les écarts de langage du corps pour laisser parler le corps, réentendre le corps, donner voix au corps. Et à ce moment-là, on est dans du savoir, on est dans des pratiques transformatives. On n'est pas seulement dans le performatif. Parce qu'il me semble que c'est un petit peu là ce qu'on essaie de dépasser le caractère de Derrida, de la pensée de la différence.
So this is an extremely important concept, idea that resonates enormously with many of the things that have been proposed in this forum. And so, for example, in exceeding the Derrida's approach to the, internal critique of deconstruction as something only internal to the domain of speech writing and Western thinking, philosophy, and so forth. It's a critique I have also done myself, and how we cannot just remain so self-referentially criticizing this from inside and with its own tools. And so how this can be overcome through other modes of thinking of the body. Well, I call it body intelligence. I've been also proposing my own term for this since 20 years, like metaformative rather than performative. I was seeing the limitations. I come from queer theory. I was seeing the limitations of performativity about 20 years ago, and I was thinking, well, metaformativity would be the understanding of how alignments emerge from less aligned fields of relations, and that as a diagnose that we need to understand the problem, which I think maybe links to the next question and the final one. So yeah, I think this is an experience. And so it was relating, apparently you did some experiments also with contact improvisation with Emma Biget, who was here last year. And so that was also an experiencing of how through the differences in between the bodies, a new transformative practice and thinking appears that goes beyond the self-referentiality of deconstruction in activating difference. So yeah, that is enormously resonating. And so just because so Pierre Jouventin is already there in the background, but so Pierre, we are running with a bit of delay. So just we will be with you in a short while. So yeah, slowly wrapping up. one important concept, I think, is the question of ouverture, the opening and the openness. For me, for example, in my own thinking, I wonder if it's also for you, it's the degree of openness in an ecosystem what allows me to understand where the problems are. So how far are the things imposing themselves or not, so to speak? How much determination is going on in a set of relations, and then how can I work around it? But I wonder how do you think this thing is a tool for understanding also the diagnosis of the problem, and how we can then deal with the more problematic things, or anyway, what is the role of the opening and the openness in your frame? Because that connects also, say, that could connect also to, say, the more final pragmatic issue of, well, there were many things we could have discussed, I think, for hours today, but there was the pragmatic side of what you discuss in La Condition Terrestre, but also maybe, because in this forum we deal a lot with how to address well, the more problematic ways of existence. How much do we need to question, well, the way in which we are all part of some of these dominant ways of existing, and how could we embrace a different way of existing in a deeply transformative sense? So really, and like some of us are proposing ways of transforming the totality of the ways of living that we have today in a variety of manners, but then understanding which are the problematic ones and how to reintroduce openness in the ones that are imposing themselves and create inclusion. Anyways, just that you know some of the discussions that we have here.
Alors, pour revenir sur la question de l'ouvert, c'est vrai qu'on pourrait dire qu'il y a 3 antécédents. Le premier antécédent, c'est Heidegger, après la pensée de l'être, où il pense qu'effectivement, il y a une catégorie hiérarchique, c'est-à-dire l'humain façonne le monde, sont producteurs de monde, et les autres êtres sont moins producteurs de monde, c'est-à-dire le chien produirait moins de monde que la richesse humaine. Eh bien, à la fin de sa vie, il inverse la pensée, et il pense une pensée de l'ouvert, où justement le chien, n'ayant pas d'intentionnalité, laisse se traverser toutes les formes du monde sans conditionner une forme a priori. Il n'est pas pris dans le logos. Donc Heidegger va complètement renverser sa métaphysique en disant « nous sommes traversés » et c'est l'ouvert. Suite à ça, c'est Blanchot qui va essayer de penser ce qu'est l'ouvert en termes de la pensée du dehors. Et ça va donner un très beau texte de Foucault dans les années 50 qui va accompagner justement cette post-phénoménologie. On va dire qu'effectivement le dehors, c'est ce qui est plus intime que l'intimité sans être l'intériorité. C'est-à-dire qu'on sort du sujet avec son intériorité, on est traversé par quelque chose de plus intime que soi-même. C'est la pensée du dehors. Foucault va abandonner ça pour faire une critique systématique des dispositifs de pouvoir, mais il va abandonner quelque part ce que le corps va faire à l'ouvert. Et là, justement, il y a un concept qu'on trouve très beau de Jean Houry. Il va articuler les deux, il va nommer une greffe de l'ouvert pour ouvrir les personnes en situation de fermeture psychique et corporelle. Il faut greffer, c'est-à-dire faire un nouveau corps en prenant 2 éléments hétérogènes et en laissant travailler l'écart. Une greffe d'ouvert, c'est inventer un nouveau corps avec de l'écart. Donc on n'est plus dans l'être, on est dans un devenir, mais on peut habiter ce devenir. Avec Deleuze, le devenir est toujours associé à la vitesse et on n'a pas le temps profond. Donc là, le travail de la greffe d'ouvert, c'est de travailler les subjectivités, de produire un écart dans les subjectivités, et l'écart va travailler en profondeur. C'est une greffe d'ouvert, et c'est toujours de l'hétérogène, humain et autre qu'humain, le temps historique et le temps profond, la montagne d'aujourd'hui et la montagne qui représente un élément. Voilà, donc il y a 3 traditions pour la question de l'ouvert. et on va dans ce sens-là.
Donc ça, c'est peut-être, that is more on a kind of more experiencing of the. Ah oui, you want to translate.
A little bit, it's complex, but so the first point is actually very much connecting to Pierre Joventin, the next speaker, because it speaks about how well, within a traditional mindset, one would say that, for example, the dog produces less richness into the world than the human, but it turns out from a different point of view, I didn't get the name of this first tradition you were mentioning, but that is the reverse, that by lacking intentionality, it turns out that the dog is more capable of meshing with the world, of naturing, and of creating overall richness of this naturing than someone having a precise intentionality, which I guess very much connects to my traditional critique of Aristotelian teleology and this kind of thing. And then you were mentioning Foucault's thinking of the outside, Pensée du dehors, which tries to highlight how there is something even more intimate than interiority that traverses us and how we can try to research into that. And then the final, when you say grève, it's like a strike of the open, because that is grève is
graft, you know, like transplant kind of.
Transplant,
Yeah,
okay.
transplanting.
Transplanting of the open,
It's a transplant of opening.
Of opening. So it's about creating compositions through this differential that brings bodies together, creating a new body. If I understood.
Yeah, because it's a psychiatric a doctor that developed this concept because he was confronted to psychotic people who are, he said they're closed, their body is kind of closed. So the idea is how to reopen the experience of the body. And so that's why he speaks about transplanting openness. Basically, it's not it's the idea of transplantation in the sense creating heterogeneity, but what it's not only heterogeneity that is important, is that how you transplant openness, which is a paradox. The idea of transplant openness, how do you transplant openness? Well, this is a bit all the idea of the psychothérapie institutionnelle that developed Jean Houry and Guattari, who was working in the Clinique de la Borde. So we were very inspired by this idea of transplanting openness as a way of integrating this idea of differentiating in the process of transformation, but which is not disintegration. It's not only we disintegrate because we welcome something that is a kind of openness. Because I think behind this idea of openness is the issue of hospitality in general, which is at stake on a more concrete or pragmatic level. How do we rethink what we call hospitality in all the sense? So how do we, not only do we welcome the other, but what do we actually call other? And how do we rethink, if we rethink our limits are and what does it mean to be human and our relation to the non-human that is part of us, well, then what does it mean to welcome non-humans and other forms of beings? So this is the issue.
Just getting the message that soon we have to give 5 minutes for people for coffee before we move on to Pierre. But so no worries, we take a bit of time. Great. I mean, this all is extremely resonant with. I think we can already open to whatever 5 minutes of questions before the 5 minutes of coffee. And meanwhile, I mean, just to comment while we see some other questions coming from someone here. I mean, one of the things we try to pose here in this forum is like, yeah, so beyond, so adding onto this production of experimental ways of opening up our realities beyond the dominant ones, but then the big question of how much practical deconstruction of the dominant ways of living, we also need to try to activate collectively through whether, as Alexandra and I think maybe you also mentioned, partly somehow in the condition terrestre, when we learn from other existing modes of living that are less disruptive, that are more meshing and less imposing themselves. But then those of us who are still living much to maybe our discomfort within the dominant ways of living and existence of industrialized and agricultural and digital societies. Well, we speak here a lot about how much we need to also transform deeply the most fundamental aspects of those dominant ways of living in a process, I call it disalignment, but that probably will need to be activated by sharing knowledges in a minoritarian way through an already rather inevitable collapse. So the realistic kind of approach that I share here, at least as a debate framework, is okay, maybe the question is how to activate some of these minoritarian knowledges for a mutation during a collapse that is already going on and that is expected to be wildly running in the upcoming decades. I don't know, just in case you want to share something on this while we get some other question from the audience.
I like very much this extension you brought up through the third approach to the openness that leads to hospitality, and I would like to add the word care, which politically has a lot of meaning, right? Thank you very much for your talk. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
As a dancer choreographer using technology, I can relate a lot to a lot of things you've been explaining in a very philosophical and meaningful way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just maybe, actually, the next book we're writing on is about hospitality and care. So it's this.
Thank you. I don't have much question. I also would like to appreciate, and it is interesting for me to see how there are many different ways of arriving on similar kind of ideas, either as you are doing through Deleuze, Guattari, and of course Merleau-Ponty. This kind of way, but also. It is interesting to see that similar way it goes in aesthetics, that is following the kind of soma aesthetic way, and going into the idea of aesthesis that is also focused on the perceptual, sensible kind of knowledges that are gained through the conscious and careful being with the others in the environment, rather than focusing on only the kind of knowledges and perceptions that are kind of distant. So this is very, very interesting. I just wanted to express my gratitude for your talk, to showing the different ways of arriving to this kind of soma aesthetic, I would say, also approach that is opening for the others in the process of careful transformation in the reciprocality, in this openness. Thank you very much, and
Great. Well, any final comments from both of you or anyone else before we take just a couple of minutes for small coffee and then continue with Pierre, who is waiting there in the background? Anyway, you are welcome to join us in the later debate.
Very interesting.
Where we will be addressing, I guess with Pierre also now we will go into uncomfortable questions about this whole collapse situation, and then also in the later debates in the afternoon with Emile Torres and yeah, today the debate question will be focusing on how utopian it is to pretend that much of what is taken for granted in sedentary, industrialized digital environments has any future at all, because of the difficulty of sustaining even agriculture in the upcoming climate instability. And then also tomorrow the debate after John Serson will be more on not just how little future it has if we stop being utopian least human supremacist, but how undesirable this kind of toxic culture of human supremacism and of exploitation and of all-encompassing ubiquity and so forth is. And so challenging both of these assumptions, the fact that that it has future, the fact that even if it had a future, why would one really hold on to it, right? And then putting the camera back onto us, how would we address the deep transformations that are needed if we start understanding how many of our actions are embedded with measures of destruction rather than collective creation in the biosphere today, and like the food issue, like the sedentary living, like well, yeah. The kinship
it's true that in today we more discussed about kind of more the metaphysical writings we had on more le toucher du monde, and in the Conditions terrestres we're more in kind of more pragmatic political issues. How this metaphysics new way of relating, how do you create the political conditions to accept and this transformation and to go to this transformation? And that's what we're more on to now. How do you, in practice, create the conditions, the material conditions for this collective transformation?
So if you want to say just a final little summary about that, that would be great.
Well, I think it's a lot of discussions that we have here in the more kind of, can we say, kind of radical ecology movements about what kind of strategy do we have in face of the growing of fascism, the development of techno-fascism, and also on one side techno-fascism, on the other side the climate changes. So we are in this tension. So what strategy, political strategy do we have? Do we more kind of create small groups of solidarity? And for what was interesting in the different discussions that we could have recently in these groups that are kind of really radical ecology position, is that we arrive at a certain point of limit of this strategy, because we are faced to the destruction of all the institutions. And so how do we do with that? Because when the hospital destroyed with all the institution, even the minimum law that protects some elements is put in question. Well, we see that it opens completely to the process of destruction and the forces of destruction. So now there is the idea of maybe changing strategies and how to rethink the relation between these radical ecologies, more kind of direct actions, and the relation with the institutions existing, and trying to find alliances, new alliances to reinvent new ways of instituting, basically, inventing new institutions. Basically, it's a bit the perspective we develop in the Conditions terrestres, is all the institutions that we inherit are institutions that were created at the Renaissance, that were created. It's the nation state. It's all these institutions that are on the model of the human subject, and the rest of the non-human is just bodies that have to be exploited and put to work. And so all the political model, the framework that organizes our the political space is based on that. So how would you create new institutions that have another starting point, which we call the earth? The earth and the ecosystems can be the new starting point, and elaborate new values from which we invent new institutions. And that's where very also close to the bioregionalist perspectives, to rethink from where do we invent communities, multi-specific communities, and new institutions that can accompany these communities. But the position of only being among each other, among the radicals, is becoming very difficult to support, because we are living in France as well, the completely destruction of the whole system. So
yeah, this bioregional thing, I think, is something that comes up in the thinking of Pierre Jouventin, who is coming next also, a small possibility of smaller communities that other authors propose. I mean, this is a whole huge debate. This is actually very core to what we discuss in this forum. And so for some of us are going to this perspective that since, well, the way things are heading now are towards an exponential acceleration of collapse, which we can expect will be terrifying. And that I personally don't see much of an expectation that one can have a majoritarian transformation where we collectively dismantle the problematic system, but we could share. My minoritarian knowledge is for a completely deep mutation during this collapse of the institutions that were part of the problem, of course. This is very much my own perspective, but in that I defend radical self-rewilding towards, well, relearning to live in new ways, without pretty much any of the exosomatic externalizations that have taken us to this failed evolution, as Pierre Jouventin says, this failed animal. But so, yeah, this is a massive debate where when we start meshing different kinds of voices around the complexities, it's where we can have a real deeper understanding. So I hope that this can be the start of a forthcoming discussion with you in a next event on these more pragmatic approaches of the second and hopefully then by then the third book of yours. So thanks. But so just to end up with a tiny note, like I'm me being very much involved in activism myself also, I am, oh, I think your microphone went on. Sorry. I have a robotized room here for cameras. I am doing these days a lot of internal critique to the environmental movement in which I am active since over 20 years, because I feel that it's mostly avoiding the core problems. The ones that the vegan or queer proposal is proposing, like, for instance, the absolutely lack of mention mostly to how the food industry is the most devastating industry on Earth for the ecological crisis right now and for non-humans also. And how without addressing the issue of plant-based diet shift, which is proposed in every single report where whoever researches on the topic, it's clear that this is the most fundamental and urgent question far above fossil fuel reduction, for example. This is avoided by the environmental movements themselves. For me, is the key sort of issue in showing that we're running straight into the abyss. I mean, it's not just the far right that is avoiding this, it's the global left and it's the environmental movements who are avoiding this kind of major question. How deep degrowth is being also majorly avoided by the major discussions even in some radical branches of ecology or climate fight. And then, of course, the overpopulation taboo that no one wants to put the finger on. So these are things we discuss here. We've been, like, since we launched the Metahuman Futures Manifesto here as a collective text, and putting the finger on all these uncomfortable issues. And we try to say, okay, well, dismantling human supremacism needs also, well, addressing the most uncomfortable and unaddressed questions in activism itself, and in intellectual criticality itself. I see these questions largely missing. So here we try to bring in all the pieces of the puzzle. But so we can keep this conversation hopefully in future together, online or on-site gatherings. Thank you so much. I think it's been wonderful to get a bit more of your wonderful world of ideas and practices. Thank you, and hopefully see you again in a future event.
Yeah, with pleasure.
Merci.
Thank you
pour la discussion.
Very interesting.
And if you want to join later some more debates, please come and we bring you into StreamYard. Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
So, Pierre, I will bring you into, I will take out now, I will bring you now into stage. I think some people might want 2-minute coffee breaks. Bring your coffee in the room, please, and then we can. Meanwhile, I add you onto the stage. So welcome, Pierre. Let me, meanwhile, because they are going for a quick, ultra quick coffee pause in the catering outside. Let me just bring. I wanted to share this image. And then I'll introduce you briefly, and then we can go. Let's just test your microphone first. Pierre?
Yes.
Yes, it's okay. We hear you well. Yeah,
Okay.
it's good. I will upload your slides after my introduction. Did you put them visible? Your slides? Can you upload them again so that we can have them ready? Okay, yeah, I see them. So after I finish the introduction, I will put on your slides. So people are returning from the ultra quick coffee. We started a bit late because of, well, Greek time issues. But let's take it easy. We have a slow forum with less speakers than usual, and we can take a bit more time with everything.
Can I put my
No,
slide?
now we have, sorry, I announced there is a change in program. We have first Pierre Jouventin, and then at the end Malgorzata, because she preferred to be off the streaming. So we changed this. So we have first Pierre with the debate, and then when we're done, we cut the streaming. Sorry for people who were expecting that, but Malgorzata prefers to be outside of the streaming. So we cut the streaming, and we have Malgorzata just locally for the people here. So let's see if the other people enter the room. Sorry about the wait. Could you, Jean-Marc, go to see if they can come in? Well, I think we can start, and latecomers can check the introduction in the online version. Okay, so it's my great honor to introduce now Pierre Jouventin, who is a very well-known ethologist and ecologist from France, who has had astonishing experiences, for instance, living 10 years alone with wild animals in the Antarctic and other places of the Earth, who has had very successful actions in achieving things like the creation of the largest natural reserve in the world through the French government, thanks to his influence, amongst other things, who after his retreat has published 12 books, from which, however, I want to highlight the one that is here being shown, L'homme, cet animal raté, which is unfortunately not yet translated into English, but hopefully we can find ways of having that happen, which is a book which I got to know less than a year ago, but which I found astonishing. It's the one book I found recently with more resonance with the kind of radical critique that this forum has also wanted to propose, but throwing in a lot of theoretical background from an ecological perspective on the reasons, on the histories that have led us to to this dead end, this evolutionary dead end, this evolutionary failure, and also with a radical acknowledgement of this failure in terms of the imminence of the collapse, and with a lot of references to ethologists and ecologists who were visionaries since 200 years ago, like Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, for example, who already more than 200 years ago was announcing that the human was leading to self-extinction after destroying the planetary environment. This was already 200 years ago, more. This is about how ethologists and ecologists have been able to understand the delirium of the dominant ways of living since even, well, the onset of industrialization at least. So it is a great honor to have Pierre here. I will now take off this slide of the book and will put on the slides from Pierre himself. Let's make sure that they work before we leave you on stage alone. Can you just run to the next one just to see if they are working? Because sometimes we are now seeing just the first one. Did you shift the slide?
Yeah, that's good.
Because we only see the first one yet. That sometimes is a problem when we are in full screen mode. Did you go to the second slide?
No,
Just to test?
I want to say only that I have to give a talk on our species, but compared with other animals. And it is my point of view. And I think that our species is pathological because it works against nature.
Sure. No, just okay. Yeah, we see the slides, so it's great. I leave you on stage. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Pierre Jouantin. I am retired now, but I worked during 40 years at the CNRS, French CNRS, French National Center of Scientific Research, and in ethology and ecology. And I was 30 years director of lab of ecology of CNRS of wild animals. And I spent 9 years in Antarctica and 3 years in Equatorial Africa. But I spent only 2 weeks in English-speaking country, so I have to apologize. Since several centuries, we had a big hope because we think that the future is very beautiful, but now we see that it is not the situation that we see, and we are not in progress. In fact, we have a lot of problems to come. Oh. I have a problem. Yes, okay. For example, you know that the gas of industry is increasing. Up. Not the practice of this. You know also the greenhouse effect, and I have a problem. And you know, as everybody, but Trump president, that the temperature is increased, and consequently we have a climatic disaster as fires, storms, and floods. In mountains, in Antarctic, the ice is melting, and the levels of oceans is increasing. But it is only the beginning. Now the prediction of scientists are not some centimeters, but 1 or 2 meters at the last of this century. Ocean also are mainly concerned. You see the hot and the warm and cool currents of water, but there is overfishing and the water temperature are increasing, and there is a problem with climate now. So there is a lack of water, dryness is increasing, and plastic waste from our civilization. Also, as everybody, that the exploitation of natural resources is increasing, and you see for all resources it is increasing, because it is not a problem of external factors, but also internal factors, because men want ever more. And it is called extractivism. And it is impossible to continue a long time like that. So you have to take in account that men are consumers. And this you see on walls the sentence as a joke: I work to buy a car to go to work. And also there is a big beginning of ecosystem collapse, and you see here polar bear in out of the ice, because the ice is now decreasing. So migrants are increasing, and it is only the beginning. And you can ask if there is a end, but the problem is the capitalism has no end. So we cannot see what happened. How did we do? We have to see to introduce our species among primates, and you see, for example, chimpanzees, two species of chimpanzee. You see Australopithecidae. They are between monkeys and humans, and you see here humans with about 20 species or subspecies of humans, and now only one surviving. It is Homo sapiens. Why? What is the sapiens way of life? What was the sapiens way of life? During 300,000 years, we were omnivorous. We occupied the ecological niche of hunter-gatherers. But our main specialty was the social hunting of big game, as wolf, lions, and killer whales. In fact, it was completely different. We have no help, physical help, but we have a brain. And we have no claw, no teeth, no smell, no nocturnal sight, but we have a big brain multiplied by 3 during the history of humans. And human hands are free now to climb to trees, but you can use to take stones and branches as a weapon. So in fact, it was a special solution, completely new, and really useful, really efficient, with our expensive brain. In fact, it is costly, because 2% of our weight use 20% of our metabolism. So it is really costly. The number of species or subspecies of human are decreasing during the past. In 2.5 million years, 20 humans were present, but during our history of life as sapiens, that is to say 300,000 years ago, seven humans occupied the Earth. But since 35 thousand years ago, only 4 humans stay, and now we are only one sapiens. So we can ask, what is the explanation? Are we a serial killer? And it's possible because Flores man, I don't know if you know Flores man, it was a very small man, 1 meter high, with a brain as an orange, living on the Flores Island in Java, in Indonesia. And he was living until recently 60,000 years, 60,000 years ago. So he disappeared, and it was not a part of a species of a part of sapiens, but it was a part of the another human, Homo erectus. Now it's finished. And another man interesting and now disappeared is the Neanderthal man. And a long time we say, oh, it is a monkey, but in fact it was really a human and a very good hunter, differently of what we said. And when we follow the history of Neanderthal, there is a part of the solution. Here, for example, you see on the first part of the slide, that is to say 40,000 years ago, there was in Europe only Neanderthal people. But when you are in free, we know that by fossil bones, and 35,000 years ago, sapiens comes from Africa and occupy the half of Europe, and the other half was occupied by Neanderthal people. But when you come to 30,000 years ago, there is about only sapiens and some Neanderthal people. So it's special what happened. And I propose a solution. When you see especially the time of 35,000 years ago, you have several problems. You have sapiens colonize Europe from Africa, as I said, but you have also sapiens domesticated wolf, because there is no wolf in Europe, in Africa, but there are in Europe, and we domesticated wolf to do dogs. You know that the wolves are ancestor of dogs, and sapiens domesticated wolf and have dogs. And why to use dogs? It is to hunt, because when you hunt with dog, preys are multiplied by 3. So I proposed 5 years ago a new explanation. Sapiens was helped by dogs to replace Neanderthal. It was a question. And 2 years later, a Canadian scientist proposed the same thesis and publish a book named The Invader. And in the title, you see how humans and their dogs drove Neanderthals extinction. So it is the same idea, and you think that it is much more complicated than we suppose. And now we obtain a lot of information for paleoanthropological science and prehistoric people, scientists. When you see the evolution, the way of sapiens, you see that it was an invasive species. He was at the beginning in Africa. He comes in Europe, as you said, you saw before, and also in Asia and Australia, but only 50,000 years ago, and in Asia, and in extreme Asia, Siberia, and when the level of water was low, they go through the land, and they came in North America, then in South America. But it is not only the things to understand. You see also, and several paleontologists saw the same thing. When humans come in a continent, several centuries after, you have no big games, no big animals. So we can ask if a man arrive somewhere, is there extinction of big prey? And in fact, it seems. So I want not to speak on, because I can speak on this problem during several hours, but I want to summarize the history of sapiens. In fact, there is not only one period. There are two periods. A long period, 300,000 years ago, the Paleolithic time, with people living as hunter-gatherers, and the Neolithic period, shorter, 10,000 years ago, and we live now in this time, and we live a farmer completely differently as of ecological niche, and also the population was moving differently. During the Paleolithic period, it was nomadism, because we have to find new animals, new plants, and when they disappeared, we have to move some kilometers to find new food. But during the Neolithic, it was the sedentarity, and during the sedentarity, we have to we understand how to manage the land, to exploit, and now super exploit the land. So and we stay in the same place, and we obtain with more work a lot of food. And the population was different. During the Paleolithic time, it was tribes, but during the Neolithic time, you have now cities. And the work is completely different. We suppose, according to the study of scientists, you have about 3 hours mainly of work per day during the Paleolithic time, and 9 hours per day during the Neolithic time. So it is 3 times more. And the violence was different also, completely. During the Paleolithic time, there was violence, but only occasionally. We know that through the fossil bones. And during the Neolithic time, we found fossil bones, sure, and with broken and sometime weapon as arrow, and so in a lot of arrow. It was war. It was not some people killing some others. And in demography, it is perhaps the more interesting finding. During the Paleolithic time, you have only one child every 4 years for a woman, because it was necessary for a woman to carry a child, and it was difficult to carry several children. And during Neolithic time, you stay in the same place, and you have a lot of food. So we have one child per year per woman. So it is increasing completely. And so the consequence is the demography of human population, since at the beginning it was several thousand people, and now it is billions. and so there, we have consequences on the management of the planet. Other understanding is the extinct species increased. Now there is, there is an extinction of biodiversity, and it is really special. And you see now it is completely different from before. Before it was rare to kill a species, but now it is usual. And you see on this impressive photography of bison skulls in 1859, and now we are if we count humans and domestic animals, you have about 94% of the weight of the terrestrial mammals. So it is completely different. In fact, you can see if you go in a cave, you see on the painting a lot of big mammals and about no humans, no plants, and you have mainly big mammals, because human people, sapiens, were a few among a lot of big animals, but now it is completely the opposite. So for the number of war is the same, and the number of dead, you see that according to the time, it is really increasing, you see. And when we compare everything, you see that the number of species is decreasing when the number of humans is increasing. So another way to show the same, if we consider free pack, crops, vegetables, and so on, and then forest, and then human. And you see, according to salt of 20 years, you see that the man is really increasing, and it is not the end, as differently of what we hear now. So we can conclude that there is no solution, and you see here a joke saying that the people are continuously speaking to find solution, but in fact they do about nothing. I have to give my solution, but it was in a special place, because where there was nobody. I work, my main place of working was inhabited island, and myself alone, I obtained some, I protected some place. For example, I ask, with the help of Hubert Reeves, the astrophysician, I obtained a meeting with the minister of environment, French Minister of Environment, and I say, oh, you have a special place in the Indian Ocean, not far from Antarctic, where I work, where I spent a lot of time, and there is nobody. You have only seabirds and mammals, sea mammals, and you can preserve it, you can protect this place. And it was a main place for seabirds, because we count, for example, 60 tons of birds per kilometer square on Crozet Island here, you see. So the minister of environment was interested, and now there is the biggest French natural reserve, created in October 2006, but now it is a world reserve, and it is one of the main world reserve. and more than 7,000 kilometers square on land and 15,000 kilometers square on sea. So it was a big reserve, but in place where there were nobody. But it was necessary to do. And I was designated as the specialist of Antarctic fauna to go to several meetings to decide what we can do with the Antarctica. You know, the Antarctica is a big continent, and there is nobody, only scientists and the tourists. So it was shared between every country, you see, according to the travel of people of each country at the beginning, discovering countries, and it was impossible to share the Antarctic Peninsula because Argentine, Chile, and Great Britain wanted the same place. So we said, if it is impossible to share the Antarctic Peninsula, it is better to put all together together and to create an international reserve, and we obtain until 2048. But we know that now that China and Russia are beginning to try to find mineral resources under the ice to exploit after this time. So now it is a land of peace, of science, and we were able to obtain only on a place where there is nobody. When there is nobody, there is no conflict. So to conclude, what can we do to change the world? And it is the big question, actually. So I propose a collective remedy to reduce fastly our impact on Earth. On the first curve, you have the same then now, continuing. And on the other curve, you have if we reduce to one child per woman in the world, what happened? In some 10 years, all problems are solved. But it is about impossible, and I think really impossible to obtain this collective remedy. So I propose, as I did for myself, an individual remedy to reduce impact program. First, you can have less children, or you can adopt children, as I did. You can reduce plane travels, and since my retirement 20 years ago, I didn't use planes, and you can reduce meat. You know, it is efficient. You can eat, if possible, bio, and you can live with simplicity and use superfluous money to sponsorship. And also, you can surround, as we do now, oneself with friends and parents. So I thank you for your attention, and I publish, since my retirement, I published 12 books, but one in English, but it was only scientific on the communication in penguins, and the other in French. And two are in relation with your topic. One is what you saw at the beginning, this book, The Man, this lost animal. And also I wrote another book that you can be interested, The Wolf, not appreciated, but so close to us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pierre. Well, while we might be getting some questions from the audience, may I also directly ask you about this extremely interesting thesis that you have in L'homme, cet animal raté, the human, this failed animal, and in this other book, Le loup, the wolf, this how do you say, mal aimé, this
Difficult to translate.
this hated one that is, however, so close to us. This idea that because it's something that also can help understanding where the roots of our failure lie. So that you expand on this theory that well, there's a pre-existing theory about, of course, that well, of course not, because not so many people know it, but that social hunting of big fauna is core to hominization. This is not just you who says this, but you focus on a more specific aspect, which is how we have more proximity with wolves than with chimpanzees because of the eco-ethological convergence, because of how we created a niche that was totally, I mean, we are the only primate who became social hunter of megafauna. And so for that, we had to develop in a very short time the social skills that wolves or lions have in their genes because of millions of years of developing social hunting of bigger animals. And we did this through a very quick enculturation, big brain techniques, and so forth. And so this got in clash with, correct me if I summarize something wrongly, with our more selfish genes of a primate, a herbivore primate from the jungle. So this is one of the elements that lies in our deep roots, in our contradictions, and which may underlie this failure, evolutionary failure that we have developed. And so also then how we may be owing, or at least that is how I interpret some of your theory, some of the human qualities we claim of altruism, humanitas, actually more to, we may have learned some of this from the dog who has it already because of their, well, inherited social way of living. So anything you want to expand on this fascinating theory of yours is welcome.
Yes. In the second book, I explain that we have what you said now, that we had during the first time, the time of Paleolithic, we were in the same ecological niche that the wolf, and so now we are in a new ecological niche, completely different, but not so efficient, because the first was good, was really efficient, because there were a lot of big animals, but they were killed and by human. And now we have to find a solution with a new solution, but this new solution is completely impossible to continue with a so high population. So we have to understand the pedagogy of catastrophe.
Any comments? Microphone.
Hello.
Hello.
Maybe some panic from the university of the gem from the hosting university. I mean, this is just a comment that your approach reflects exactly what we think of ourselves as animals. So thank you so much for this great contribution. I also believe that, well, something violent must have taken place, really violent, from our species against others. So I just wanted to say that yeah, it's clear. It's more than clear. Yes.
I think it's a very nice, we will very nicely follow up to the later presentation soon by Malgorzata, which is on the Neanderthal precisely and on claiming it's alas we are not Neanderthal, we were not. So this issue of what made it that precisely the sapiens became this most destructive species of all, which some people connect also to the fact that we tended more to serialized thinking and tool making rather than differential, like the Neanderthal apparently was more artistic in its way of producing things that were more unique, that were more like a body intelligence rather than abstract intelligence. So in any case, of course, this is a matter of speculation, but as something that may be a deep root of our failure, as different from other hominid branches or Homo branches. Yeah, what was this that led the sapiens to this tendency to serialized homogeneous abstractions that have become so inherently destructive as a matter of speculation and
in fact, it is a Darwinian selection. Among tribes, they have to be more efficient to kill animals during the first period of Paleolithic, and so they are, when they are better, they have they are selected and they continue to live. If they are not efficient, they are out. And in fact, if you can see on the curve that the brain is growing. It begins among other species of humans, but now it is we are at the end, at the top, but it is so efficient that we kill everything.
Yeah, no, my question is kind of deeper in the sense of not just why this branch became, more successful, but how it ever came to exist. Like this idea of how is it that there came to be a species on Earth that became so serial in its making, so external in its techniques. So it's a more philosophical question of because it might not have happened, like some evolutionary accident led to particular Homo species that developed this tendency towards being a serial killer, so to speak, but in a way that maybe might not have come to be. But of course, this is just, it's a speculative question more in terms of trying to understand how much we need to dismantle in our, in our future projects, in our minoritarian mutations, like you are also proposing, like, since collectively we see it's heading to collapse because whatever is happening now is really just accelerating in the worst possible manner. But you, I think, also agreed with, okay, let's mobilize individually, collectively, some of us minoritarian manner, what we can. Then in thinking, how far do we take the critique of where we may have seen the origins of the problem, even if it's always a speculative question, is, worthwhile to see how much we want to dismantle in the process.
I'm not sure that I agree with the perception of with the idea that Homo sapiens is exactly a serial killer species. It's a matter of perception. Homo sapiens is a territorial species, like all other species, and I understand the reference to the wolf. Okay, I think that it kills because in the way that a virus kills, an animal that wants to expand its territory kills. It's not a matter of ideology. The way human beings have constructed their societies demand continuous development and expansion, and all these things end up in violence. I don't think that human nature is evil by nature, by default. Okay, it ends up being like that, or because of external conditions, which are shaped by a variety of factors that have to do with economy, with ideology, politics. I don't think that humans are more dangerous animals than other animals. They just have they've just found themselves at the top of the food chain, and they are able to express themselves and expand themselves in a way that nobody can control them. Okay, that's my point.
There's also some question from Sophie.
Yeah, can I say it in French, maybe?
Yeah, sure.
Oui, merci pour cette intervention, c'est intéressant. Et ça me fait penser qu'il y a, ça rejoint un petit peu ce qui a été dit avant, mais j'ai l'impression qu'il y a une tension entre les approches, comment dire, plutôt scientifiques, sciences de la nature, qui vont mettre l'accent sur l'espèce humaine, et les approches souvent plutôt issues des sciences humaines qui vont mettre l'accent sur la diversité des manières de faire communauté. Et moi, ma question, ce serait par exemple, comment vous comprenez le fait qu'il y ait certaines ce qu'on appelle culture, ou en tout cas certaines manières de faire communauté parmi l'espèce humaine, qui n'ont pas été dans cette logique de destruction. C'est-à-dire que dans l'évolution même de l'espèce humaine, il y a quand même eu des trajectoires différentes. Le capitalisme, il est né dans un contexte historique, dans une certaine civilisation, alors qu'il y a plein d'autres communautés qui, elles, n'ont pas été dans des logiques d'extermination, qui ont réussi à cohabiter avec les autres formes de vie. Donc, comment vous expliquez ça dans votre schéma, l'existence de ces autres, justement, de formes de vie communautaire non destructrices?
Est-ce que tu voudrais faire une petite traduction de la demande pour le public?
Oui.
Yes. Yeah, I was saying that I often see in the discussions a kind of tension or different approach of this question of human evolution between one perspective is more proposed by natural sciences, which speak about the human species in general, and social sciences, which more speak about the different forms of community and histories and societies that have developed different relations between humans and non-humans. So I was asking to Pierre Jouventin how, in his perspective, he explains that the fact that some human communities have not destroyed, didn't have this destructive relation to the other beings, and it is in a certain history. So would you explain that?
Oui, est-ce que je peux parler en français? James, you can translate?
On peut, oui, il faut traduire après, mais tu veux reprendre d'abord en français et puis on essaie de traduire.
D'accord. Alors oui, en fin de compte, je pense que l'homme n'est pas responsable. Il n'y a pas de responsabilité là-dessus. Ça, c'est une évolution qui s'est faite. En réalité, c'est une espèce qui est partie dans une mauvaise direction, qui est partie dans une solution qui était nouvelle, mais qui n'a pas d'avenir. C'est-à-dire qu'il nous manque une partie. C'est-à-dire que actuellement, vous évoquez les chasseurs-cueilleurs, les derniers chasseurs-cueilleurs, mais il n'y en a quasiment plus. Ce n'est pas un hasard. C'est qu'en réalité, on a le capitalisme et la suite de cette évolution, quand on est passé du paléolithique au néolithique, on est de plus en plus efficace pour exploiter la nature, mais on l'exploite trop. Donc, on a à la fois une grande efficacité due à notre cerveau, et puis de l'autre côté, on a une faiblesse parce qu'on ne sait pas, on n'arrive pas à aller au-delà, c'est-à-dire prévoir la suite. Les chasseurs-cueilleurs, ils étaient peu efficaces par rapport à nous, mais par contre, leur solution était indestructible. La nourriture se renouvelait continuellement. Donc, c'était très facile d'arriver à suivre. Alors que maintenant, avec notre système, on a un système qui est bloqué. On est dans une boîte sans issue.
Oui, mais,
Et d'ailleurs,
mais du coup, ça veut dire que
pardon.
dans cette perspective-là, la seule option qui reste, c'est la destruction de l'humanité, en fait. Alors que si on se dit, bah, en fait, c'est la manière de faire communauté compte, bah, du coup, ça veut dire qu'on peut imaginer d'autres manières de faire communauté. Mais si c'est lié à la nature humaine elle-même, bah, ça veut dire qu'il n'y a aucune solution. Alors que si
Non,
on pense que c'est lié à certaines manières de faire communauté, société, en incluant les non-humains ou non, et que nous, on a une société qui a exclu, et ça, en plus, c'est assez daté historiquement, parce que ça commence vraiment le capitalisme au 15e siècle. Avant, c'est pas le cas. Enfin, je veux dire, il y a d'autres compositions qui sont pas aussi destructrices.
oui, mais en réalité, c'est une évolution. C'est-à-dire que, évidemment, tous les gens des sciences humaines partent normalement de 1500 ou 1850, c'est-à-dire de la civilisation industrielle. Mais en réalité, c'est ce que j'essaye de montrer, c'est que c'est beaucoup plus compliqué, c'est-à-dire que ça vient d'avant. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a deux périodes. Il y a une période où on vit en équilibre avec le milieu, comme les chasseurs-cueilleurs, et on n'a pas beaucoup d'efficacité pour exploiter la nature, mais par contre, ça suffit pour nous et ça peut durer indéfiniment. Et puis ensuite, on est passé dans une solution. On a été coincé, notre système, notre niche écologique de tuer les gros animaux s'est bloqué. Et sans qu'on soit responsable, on est arrivé à une solution qui n'a pas d'avenir. Et donc, on est actuellement coincé. Ceci dit, pour être plus optimiste, on est largement assez intelligent pour trouver des solutions. En réalité, ce sont des problèmes simples. C'est des problèmes, quand vous comparez la population mondiale, vous voyez bien que ça ne peut pas durer indéfiniment, on ne peut pas augmenter comme ça. Et quand vous voyez qu'actuellement, il y a plein de politiques et d'industriels qui vous racontent qu'au contraire, il faut faire encore plus d'enfants pour payer les retraites, c'est la vision à court terme. Donc, en réalité, moi, j'essaye de replacer l'espèce humaine dans un ensemble animal, c'est-à-dire comment ça peut fonctionner un système comme ça. Et nous, on a été très bons sur le début, et puis notre système, notre niche écologique, la première, s'est arrêtée, il a fallu en trouver une autre, mais l'autre, elle est catastrophique. Donc, si on n'utilise pas notre cervelle pour autre chose, c'est-à-dire réduire la population ou trouver des solutions, eh bien, on est coincé. On est une espèce qui n'a pas d'avenir.
Let me do a bit of translation first. So
Yeah.
the discussion, which I find extremely interesting and relevant, is about whether. Huh? Sorry. But maybe for future YouTubers in the coming, decades till YouTube collapses, we have people who might see this. A very relevant conversation about whether there is a certain human nature which connects actually to your question that is by default destructive, or whether, as Sophie says, well, not necessarily, because we have so many examples of communities that are not so destructive, and so we can distinguish between predominant tendencies and then other plural modes of community that we can rethink, which leads, of course, to whether the solution is just to try to get extinct as soon as possible, or whether we can reinvent our community making in ways that afford a livable future. So just to put it very shortly, but I think there might be a term of misunderstanding here. I think if I read correctly Pierre's proposals in L'Homme s'est raté or so, they include this idea of bioregional communities, small communities that reinvent the ways of living. So I do think that if I may correct me, Pierre, if I'm wrong, that you also see, well, some potential future in a rather strong reinvention of how we can live, not just, say, individually, say, having less children and eating differently, but having communities that are more in contact with local ecosystems and that are more self-sustained. I think this is part of your ideas, which I think might connect more to also some visions that maybe Sophie and David are having. So from knowing both sides, I think there are some common elements, maybe, although the critique may be differently framed. But correct me if I'm wrong. There were more comments.
I want to say that it is not. You have yes, a comment. Okay, speak. There is somebody to speak now.
I just want to throw the stone in the a little bit of a stone which we share, a lot of us, not necessarily in this room, but about the solution being practically the destruction of capitalism. I don't see any other way. That's a personal opinion, deeply embedded in my political understanding of how destructive we have gotten today, where just so much wealth is concentrated more and more every single minute of the day into the hands of fewer and fewer people. So as long as we're dealing with this situation, which in the end may lead to the destruction and the death of many, many people, so the decrease of population due to this destruction, I personally, deeply inside of my thinking, see the only solution in all possible attempts to destroy or diminish the power of the present capitalism.
I totally agree with Jean-Marc. For me, it's impossible to view to approach the problems of humanity without focusing on the fact that we live in a strongly and over-capitalistic society. Okay, no solution to be examined to the problem unless we actually destroy capitalism. That's it may sound politically extreme or immature or whatever, but we have to face and accept the fact that capitalism is the problem. Even before, even those feudal societies, which before the Industrial Revolution had all these capitalist characteristics, which later got the name of capitalism. But even the self-destructive nature of human beings is related to that. Okay, that's why I mentioned this is a very common science fiction trope, the fact that humanity is approached as a virus. Okay, and this nature that humans, this resemblance that humans have got to the virus species, has to do with the economy. No matter how hard we try, I saw the possible solutions of using eco-friendly technology and using to avoid reusing their planes and all these things. Yes, these are simple things that everyone can choose, or any of us can choose to do. But no matter how hard we try, no matter how much we recycle or we live in we have a healthy and eco-friendly lifestyle, the majority of the destruction comes from the big profit, from the capital. So unless we change this fact, unless we stop capitalism expanding itself in such a way, anything, all the rest is just fruitless effort, nothing more. Okay, that's my opinion.
We have to slowly move to Malgorzata, who is waiting. We will end the streaming before that, so let's try to wrap up the conversation before we move on to Malgorzata. So I would like to just add a comment, because we have discussed this in previous forums, and as some of you know, I disagree with the fact that capitalism is the problem. Capitalism is just one face of a much older and broader problem. Capitalism is just one expression of a human tendency to homogeneous expansion, destructive homogeneous expansion that had perhaps no return inflection in the Neolithic, but with roots even earlier, as we have heard, with the mass extinctions of megafauna due to excessive hunting in the Paleolithic. So we need to understand the far deeper roots than capitalism of this whole story of homogeneous expansion, of toxic homogeneous expansion on Earth, whereby also the alternatives to capitalism have not proven to be better than capitalism, if they continue with the idea of the growing humanity, the ever-growing productivist humanity. So as long as we keep holding onto a human supremacist background of humanity in the center with a socialist productivist, this is the same problem. It's ultimately absolutely the same problem being reproduced. And so we are naively thinking that the problem is capitalism. Capitalism is just one face of a much broader and deeper problem. Anyway.
Yes, I
Well,
agree.
this is one of the major discussions we have been having in this forum since the 3 years. And of course, we will be disagreeing in many places around this, but we have put on the table many arguments on why capitalism can never be put as the blame. If we have this narrow focus, I think it's a narrow-minded focus on just a very recent phase of human expansion, when we realized with visions like what partly Pierre was showing, that the destructiveness was long before capitalism. It was already there. That destructivity was there long before capitalism. Then we can understand that capitalism is just one expression of a much older problem. And if we want to go to the roots of the problem, which are many and complex and hard to see, then we have to look far beyond the roots of capitalism. This is anyway just topic for debate. We can continue later in the day. We should be moving to Malgorzata soon. So let's wrap up. Thanks, Pierre. Thanks so much for your presence here. I hope we keep the conversations with you running. And so now for the audience, because we changed the order, now we will have Malgorzata Kowalske. Sorry for my pronunciation. But before putting you online, Malgorzata, we will close first the streaming, right? So Malgorzata prefers to be outside of the streaming. For those of you online, apologies for that. So it will be more for the local audience in Greece. So now we will end the stream. I will take... we come back with the other session after lunch. So thank you, Pierre. I remove you now first. I was just saying it right now. Okay, so now end stream. And hopefully we can continue having the local video.